The hospital corridors were almost silent at midnight, broken only by the faint hum of machines and the rhythmic squeak of a mop gliding over the polished floor. The world outside had long gone to sleep, but Daniel Hayes was still at work. His back ached, his hands were cracked from cleaning chemicals, and exhaustion hung on him like a heavy coat. But he didn't complain. He was a janitor, invisible to most, yet he carried the quiet pride of a man who knew that every shining floor and sterile hallway was his unseen signature. If you believe in kindness, in the power of small acts and second chances, please take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps stories like this reach more hearts. Daniel had been working at St. Mary's Hospital for nearly a decade, taking the night shifts no one else wanted. It paid little, but it was steady, and he needed steady. After losing his wife to cancer 6 years ago, he'd learned to live with the hollow ache of loneliness. His teenage son, Evan, barely spoke to him anymore, buried in resentment over their broken home. Daniel couldn't blame him. Life had been hard on both of them. Every mop stroke and bucket haul wasn't just about keeping the hospital clean. It was his way of keeping his family afloat, one shift at a time. That night, as the clock edged past 11:30, he was cleaning the oncology wing, a place that never failed to stir painful memories. The soft beeping from the rooms echoed the same sound he had once heard beside his dying wife's bed. It made him pause, close his eyes for a second, and breathe deeply before moving on. But as he passed room 417, he noticed something unusual. The light inside was still on, though visiting hours had long ended. Through the small window in the door, he saw an elderly woman sitting upright in her bed, staring out the window with tired eyes. She looked frail, her silver hair glowing faintly in the fluorescent light, her hands clasped tightly on her lap as if she were holding on to something invisible. Daniel hesitated. He wasn't supposed to enter patient rooms unless assigned, but something about her stillness, about the loneliness painted on her face, pulled him in. Quietly he knocked and peeked inside. The woman turned her head slowly, surprised to see someone there. She didn't speak, just offered a faint, tired smile that somehow carried both dignity and sadness. "Just cleaning," Daniel said softly, unsure if she could hear him. But she nodded, her eyes following his every movement. As he worked, he felt her gaze linger, and for some reason it didn't make him uncomfortable. It made him seen. After finishing, he moved to the door but paused. Something in his heart told him to stay, even if just for a minute more. "Can't sleep?" he asked gently. The woman's lips trembled slightly before she spoke. "I don't like the silence. It feels louder than noise sometimes." Her voice was thin, fragile, like the flutter of paper in the wind. Daniel smiled softly. "Yeah, I know that feeling." He stayed a little longer, listening as she talked about her late husband, her children who lived abroad and rarely called, about the old days when she used to dance every Sunday night in her living room. Her name was Margaret Sinclair, though she preferred Maggie. She had been in the hospital for weeks, recovering from pneumonia that had worsened due to her age. "Doctors say I'm getting better," she said with a weak chuckle. "But the truth is, I'm just tired." There was something about her honesty that reached deep into Daniel's chest. Maybe it was because he too was tired, not just of work, but of feeling unseen. So he stayed. He pulled up a chair, careful not to wake the nurses, and listened. Maggie's words painted pictures of a life once full of love and laughter. She asked him about his family, and though he hesitated at first, he told her a bit about Evan, how they used to go fishing, how he wished his son would talk to him again. Maggie smiled softly and said, "Sometimes the people we love the most need to hurt alone before they find their way back." Time passed unnoticed. The night deepened, the lights dimmed, and the world seemed to shrink to that one quiet hospital room where two lonely souls shared pieces of their lives. For the first time in a long time, Daniel didn't feel invisible. The next few nights he found himself returning to Maggie's room. He brought her small things, an extra blanket when she looked cold, a cup of tea from the break room, a small radio he found in Lost and Found so she could listen to old songs. The nurses noticed but said nothing. They had seen enough lonely patients to understand that sometimes kindness heals better than medicine. Soon Maggie began waiting for him. Her eyes would light up the moment she saw him enter, and Daniel couldn't help but smile back. One night rain poured outside, tapping gently against the hospital windows. Daniel was mopping near the front desk when Maggie's nurse rushed up to him. "Daniel, she's asking for you," she said quietly. "She's been restless all evening." He dropped his mop and hurried to room 417. Maggie was sitting up, her breathing shallow, her skin pale. But when she saw him, she smiled faintly. "I thought maybe you weren't coming," she whispered. "I wouldn't miss it," Daniel said softly, pulling the chair closer. For a long while, they said nothing. The only sound was the rain and the soft hum of machines. Then Maggie spoke again. "Do you ever wonder what your purpose is, Daniel? Why you're still here when others are gone?" He swallowed hard. Every day, he admitted. She nodded, closing her eyes. "Maybe it's to remind people that kindness still exists. You've done that for me, you know. You made me feel not alone." Her words hit him harder than he expected. He reached out, gently holding her hand. It was cold but steady. "You're not alone, Maggie." "Not tonight," she smiled, her eyes glistening. "Then stay a little while longer?" And he did. He stayed until dawn began to break over the city, until the gray light crept through the blinds. By the time he had to leave, Maggie was asleep, her breathing calm. He looked at her one last time before heading to the janitor's room to clock out. It had been a long night, but somehow his heart felt lighter. The next evening, when he arrived for his shift, the nurse met him at the door with an unreadable expression. "Daniel," she said softly, "Maggie passed away this morning." He froze, his breath catching. "What?" She went peacefully in her sleep. "She asked us to give you something." The nurse handed him a small envelope worn at the edges. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was a handwritten note. "Dear Daniel, thank you for staying. Thank you for seeing me when the world forgot I existed. I didn't tell you everything. My family, they have their own lives, and I didn't want to be a burden. But I want you to know something. Kindness never goes unseen. Love, Maggie." Tears welled up in his eyes as he clutched the letter to his chest. The hospital felt emptier without her presence. For the next few days, he worked in silence, the weight of her absence pressing heavily on him. But even through the grief, her words stayed with him. Kindness never goes unseen. A week later, as his shift ended, Daniel walked out into the chilly night air. He was still in his janitor's uniform, holding his worn lunchbox, when he noticed something unusual. Parked near the entrance was a black limousine, sleek, polished, completely out of place in front of a hospital at 1 a.m. A man in a dark suit stepped out and approached him. "Mr. Hayes?" the man asked. Daniel frowned. Yes?" The man handed him an envelope sealed with a gold emblem. "This is for you." Daniel opened it cautiously. Inside was a formal letter from a law firm. It explained that Margaret Sinclair had left a portion of her estate to him, an unexpected act of gratitude. She had been the widow of a successful businessman, and though her children were well off, she had chosen to leave Daniel something meaningful, a small trust fund for his son's college tuition, and a note in her handwriting tucked inside. "You once said you didn't know your purpose. Maybe this will help you find it. Keep helping people, Daniel. The world needs hearts like yours." Daniel stood frozen, the letter trembling in his hands as tears blurred his vision. The chauffeur walked around the car and opened the door. "Mrs. Sinclair's family wanted to offer you a ride home," he said respectfully. Daniel hesitated, overwhelmed. The limousine gleamed under the streetlights, a stark contrast to his humble uniform. Slowly he stepped in, clutching the letter against his chest. As the car pulled away from the hospital, memories of Maggie's gentle smile filled his mind. He realized that sometimes the most extraordinary moments in life came quietly, disguised in ordinary nights. The next morning, when he got home, he found his son sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone. Evan looked up, surprised to see his father wearing a faint smile. "You're home late," he muttered. Daniel nodded. "Yeah, had someone to say goodbye to." He placed the letter on the table and told his son everything, from the lonely woman he had comforted to the limousine waiting for him outside. Evan listened quietly, something softening in his expression as his father spoke. For the first time in years, they sat together in silence that wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. Before going to bed, Evan looked back at him and said, "She was right, you know. About kindness." That night, Daniel lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Maggie's words. He realized that life wasn't about what he had lost. It was about the moments he still had, the people he could still reach, and the kindness he could still give. The next day he went to work not just as a janitor, but as a man who understood the quiet power of compassion. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It helps keep these true-to-life stories alive for others who need a reminder that kindness matters. And before you go, tell us in the comments below, have you ever met a stranger who changed your life? Because sometimes it's the smallest gestures, the ones no one sees, that leave the biggest marks on our souls.